Hello, and thank you for joining us. This is No Soundbites Allowed, and I am your host, Michael Voss, the political dragon in our Bronx offices. It is November 9th, approximately 3 p.m., and I wanted to address something that was brought up by one of our audience members. In fact, it was a question for us to look into a specific bill in Congress and to try and understand that a little more. And we were going to cover this on our Sunday live stream, but I decided it may deserve its own video. We hope you'll enjoy that. But before we get started with that analysis, let's mention that if it's the first time that you're seeing our channel, we welcome you. We thank you for being part of our audience. We want you to know we do long-form political commentary. And every Sunday at 2:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, we do a live stream with you. We reach out across all the social media across the world to hear your voice on the issues that matter. International, domestic, everything in between. We try and address what you think because we believe in the First Amendment. We believe in your right to speak about the issues that affect us all, even if your government doesn't agree, even if the internet overlords don't like it. We listen to you every Sunday at 2:30 p.m. It was just a few days ago that we mentioned on social media that we had heard the Marine Corps was canceling the Marine Corps ball. Now, for those who are unfamiliar, yes, I served in the Marines like my father and many of my associates, but more importantly, in hearing about this, the Marine Corps Ball is the celebration of the Marine Corps, the birth of the Marines. The Marine Corps is actually 1 year older than the United States itself. And of course, on November 10th, this is a big deal. Marines across the world do celebrate this, and they have a ball. It's rather a big event in the Marine Corps. And we do enjoy this. So it is something that is rarely, if ever, canceled, usually only in times of war or deployment. So hearing, as we had, that the Marine Corps Ball would be canceled, either for the entire Marine Corps or for some of its units, that indicates an imminent deployment, in our opinion. And usually that is the case. It takes something extreme to cause that to be stopped. We have since heard from many individuals that there is going to be, or at least some units are on standby for deployment. We have heard from some sources that this includes Navy SEALs and other top-level quick deployment forces of the United States. Given this nature of the world at this time, we would expect that that's probably going to be somewhere in the Middle East. We do know that the conflict with Syria, American troops in Syria and Iraq, are engaging more and more with Iran-backed militia and terrorist units. And so there is this conflict going on. And it is very likely that the Marines or segments of the Marine Corps will be deployed into the Middle East, either to supplement American forces in Iraq or in Syria, very likely also to some extent in Israel, possibly in attempts to try and get back American hostages that have fallen out of the mainstream news media coverage. But again, some 15 or more Americans are currently held hostage by Hamas in Gaza as human shields and are being tortured, something we have not forgotten on this channel. And we believe that the Biden administration may be trying to get some of those hostages back by force, military maneuver, as well as continued negotiations by Antony Blinken, Secretary of State, in terms of trying to purchase and pay off Hamas, a terrorist organization, to get those individuals back, just as the Biden administration has already done in trying to promote $100 billion in humanitarian aid, which inevitably must reach Hamas, the government of Gaza, the terrorist organization, to get back 2 American hostages so far. That's the world as it exists. That was the environment in which this came up. And in that discussion, Rich Pertel asked us to look into HR771. And I want to be clear. He says, have you read HR771? It's full of anti-Iran saber rattling. A war with Iran will be far messier than Afghanistan or Iraq. Thomas Massey, Representative Thomas Massey, was the only Republican to vote no, the correct vote. That's an interesting point of view. Now, to be clear, Rich Patel is someone I've known for many years. Rich Patel is a libertarian. He has different views than me. Sometimes we agree, sometimes we disagree, like I could say about many libertarians and Democrats that I have known over the last couple of decades now. So that's what Rich proposed. I don't entirely agree with Rich on this. But more importantly, most people don't know HR771 exists. Most people don't know the bills that members of Congress vote on, partially because the news media almost never actually tells you what the bill number is. Instead, they give you a summary, and they might, 50% of the time, actually tell you the name of the bill, but usually they just tell you how they feel about whatever bill may have been voted on. And usually because of the left-leaning bias in the news media, it's usually, if it's by a Republican, then it's horrible. If it's from the left, well, then it's great. And that's how they usually promote that. So what we wanted to do is actually look at the bill itself. Who put it out there? What did they say? Now, I'm going to be reading the bill along with you so that we can all be on the same page. Very simple. The bill is HR 771, standing with Israel as it defends itself against barbaric war launched by Hamas and other terrorists. Let's be clear. Hamas is an internationally recognized terrorist organization. That is a fact. It is backed by Iran. That is a fact. It is the same as Hezbollah or the Houthis in Yemen, Hezbollah being in Lebanon. And it's very similar to what we see rebels and terrorists that are in Syria and Iraq. This is not new news. So it is a terrorist organization. That is a fact. It is a fact that is suppressed by the mainstream media and many colleges and academia when they say that they are pro-Palestine. There is no such thing as Palestine. It does not exist. There is Gaza, there is the West Bank, there is Israel, but there is no Palestine. Now, the governing body of Gaza is Hamas. They were elected. Yes, in the West Bank, the people in the Gaza Strip elected a government that is a terrorist organization. That is a fact. Again, these are indisputable facts, and you cannot rewrite that. So when you say you are pro-Palestine, you are actually pro-Hamas. That is the government. Individual people are individual people, but that is the government of the West Bank. That is the government of Gaza Strip. And that's what, when they say they're pro-Palestine, they're actually pro-Hamas. And when we give aid to government institutions. Again, the institution in charge is Hamas, a terrorist organization. So when people are running around like the Democratic Socialists of America and many of the colleges like Harvard, like Cornell, like Cooper Union, they're supporting terrorism. The news media doesn't like to say it that way. They want to make it sound nicer. They want to make it sound palatable to the American people. But at the end of the day, as is recognized internationally, supporting Palestine and humanitarian aid to the West Bank or to Gaza inevitably, to some extent, always supports Hamas and its efforts at terrorism. That is just a fact. It cannot be disputed. You may not like it. You may want to focus on something else about that, but that is an indisputable fact. Given that understanding, when we look at this bill, which was introduced by Representative Mike McCall of Texas's 10th District, okay, we know that the United States, the only ally of the United States in the Middle East is Israel. That is a fact. The only stable government in the Middle East is Israel. Quite honestly, let's be realistic about that. Other than Saudi Arabia, truly the only stable government is in fact Israel and the greatest ally of the United States. It is also, Israel, the only truly democratic nation in the Middle East. The others have varying levels of monarchies or autocracies. They have varying levels of terrorist cells and organizations. They're not democratic. Again, we point to Afghanistan as a great example. What do you have there? A religious theocracy that is promoted by the Taliban. And inside that nation, there is also ISIS and Al-Qaeda, all vying for power. And in different regions, they have that power. We see that in Syria, a dictatorship, authoritarian government. We have Saudi Arabia. That's a monarchy. These are not democratic nations. They are various other types of government. The only democracy is, in fact, Israel. So, standing with Israel, our ally, as it defends itself, Israel was attacked on October 7th. That is a fact. It is indisputable. There is no question about that. Hamas, a terrorist organization, purposefully and after great planning, intended to attack civilians. That is a fact. They attacked civilians on purpose, not military bases, not military assets. They went after civilians. They killed civilians. They captured civilians. They killed babies. It is the most gruesome and evil thing since possibly World War II. Not to belittle World War II or to normalize it, but the fact is, this is horrendous. And for Israel, the attack on October 7th is the equivalent of the United States 9/11, the attack on us. Again, we didn't cause that. They did this. Whether or not you think the political structure of Israel is good or bad, whether or not you think the policies of Israel are good or bad, the fact is Israel wasn't attacking Palestinian or Hamas babies. Hamas did that. You cannot escape that fact. So Israel, and worldwide everyone agrees, Israel has a right to defend itself from individuals, terrorist organizations that would kill babies and torture innocent civilians as well as kill them and to use them as human shields. Everyone should be able to defend against that kind of horrific evil. That is the context of this event. This was written on October 11th. It was introduced into our government on October 11th, 4 days after the attack. And at the time, we had numbers of somewhere around 1,300 individuals. It has since increased, depending on your source, up to about 1,600 civilians were killed. We know that somewhere around 33 Americans were killed in that attack. And we know that somewhere around 15 Americans, maybe 16, maybe more, were taken as hostages, as well as individuals from around the world. And somewhere around 242 known individuals are currently being held as hostage and human shield and being tortured by Hamas at this moment. That is a fact. While it says 3,000 rockets, we know that within the first 48 hours, roughly 8,000 rockets, most of them purchased from Iran, Iran-made rockets, were used by Hamas to attack civilians. Also, rockets were also used by Hezbollah in the north from Lebanon to attack civilians in Israel as well. So well over almost 10,000 rockets have been used just within the first 5 days of this horrific, unprovoked attack. And to address those who would say, well, it was provoked, there is no justification for killing babies. There is nothing that Israel has done that would justify killing babies. You just can't justify that. And if you try, you're a horrific monster, in my opinion. So now we know who introduced the bill, why the bill was introduced, the full context. Let's add some additional context to this. There are 437 members of Congress. That's a fixed number. There are 2 members who are non-voting and 435 members that are voting, made up of representatives from every state across the nation. That is a fact. We see that there was a vote. Every Republican, 222 except Thomas Massey, so out of 223 Republicans, 222 voted in favor of this. 209 Democrats voted in favor of this as well. So we have almost everyone except roughly 10 individuals all voted in favor of this resolution to decry and denounce and hopefully not support Hamas, a terrorist organization, in its attempt to commit genocide, something we should have added in. Hamas exists to commit genocide against Israel, just like Iran has made that same declaration. Same with Hezbollah, same thing with the Houthi rebels out of Yemen. They all want to destroy the state and the people of Israel as well as the United States. They've declared this publicly. They have written this down as part of their charter, as their foundation, and as their justification for their acts of terrorism. So that's not a question. So this is pretty straightforward. And when my friend Rich Bertel mentions, well, the Republicans are saber rattling, well, so are the Democrats. Let's get that straight. Congress, overwhelmingly, virtually every member except pretty much the Squad and Thomas Massie, said this was an accurate thing to denounce. I have no problem with that. So it's not just Republicans, it's Republicans and Democrats uniformly and overwhelmingly agree with HR 771. So what in fact does HR 771 say? This is something that most Americans don't know, and you can find this out. It is not hard to find. You can go to congress.gov or govtrack.us. You can search for the bill and see it for yourself. Like every bill that is presented, introduced into Congress, whether it's voted on or not, you have access to see all of this. The news media doesn't want you to actually read the bills. They want you to trust their summary of it that they give you in 30 seconds on the nightly news. I suggest you should actually read the bills for yourself so that you have a true understanding of what these people who are supposed to represent you, what they are agreeing to, what they stand for, what they believe in, what they are forcing you to live with. The resolution starts off, standing with Israel as it defends itself against the barbaric war launched by Hamas and other terrorists. I have no problem with this. That starts off perfectly fine. Whereas on October 7th, 2023, Hamas terrorists launched a massive unprovoked war on Israel by air, land, and sea, including firing thousands of rockets. This is factually correct. Whereas this heinous assault took place just after the 50th anniversary of the start of the multi-front 1973 Yom Kippur War against Israel, which Israel won. This is correct. Whereas Hamas terrorists crossed the land border and began slaughtering Israelis and foreign nationals and abducting hostages of multiple countries in towns in southern Israel, including children and the elderly. This is all factually correct. Whereas since October 7, 2023, Hamas launched over 4,500 rockets into southern and central Israel. The number is actually closer to 10,000, but it is factually correct as of October 11th. Whereas since October 7, 2023, Hamas terrorists have killed over 900 Israelis and injured more than 2,600 others. The numbers have significantly increased, although the media today is now focusing on what's happening in Gaza, and they have ignored the number of Israelis that have been killed, the numbers of individuals from around the world that have been killed, and specifically for the United States, the number of Americans that were killed or captured as hostages. That's no longer in the news, but it is relevant and it is important, and the number is higher than what was initially reported on October 11th by roughly double. But let's go on. Whereas at least 11 United States citizens in Israel are among those killed by Hamas since October 7th. In fact, that number is at least 33. It's potentially higher at this point. Whereas since October 7th, Hamas is directly responsible for the deaths of hundreds of Palestinians. Yes, They have killed their own people. In fact, not just by attacking those who were in Israel, but also because 1 in 5 of the rockets that are being fired by Hamas have failed. Well over 500 rockets have failed that we are aware of, that have actually fallen. They were fired from Gaza and fell in Gaza, failing to reach the Israeli border and failing to reach anyone in any Israeli civilians. So yes, Gaza and Hamas is killing its own people in trying to kill civilians. And that is continuing even as we speak today. And again, this is not addressing the number of Americans that are taken hostage, that have been tortured, which we believe is at least 15, possibly more. And that isn't addressed in this bill, although it should be. Whereas the expansion of the war to other fronts by Hezbollah, Iran, or others would create even more devastating regional catastrophe. That is true. And we have seen that that is exactly what is happening. Hezbollah has begun to attack Israel from the north. We have seen that the Houthi rebels out of Yemen have been firing rockets that have been intercepted by the United States forces, its naval forces in the Mediterranean Sea, have been shooting down these rockets. We are seeing that it has been expanding. Iran has made multiple threats against Israel and the United States, and they have engaged through their puppets in various nations attacks against the United States and its assets and personnel. It is expanding. So the catastrophe is growing. This is a correct and true statement. Whereas Hamas is a United States designated foreign terrorist organization, not just with the United States, but in multiple nations, including with the UN, it is recognized as a terrorist organization. Whereas Iran has long provided support to Hamas, they provide at least $100 million a year to Hamas, separate of any other organization, and that is direct funding from Iran, not counting funding that is provided through various humanitarian organizations that filter back to Hamas, or that Hamas raids those NGOs, those NGO organizations, and steals many of the resources from them. So yes, this is a true statement. Whereas Iran has long provided support to Hamas and other terrorist groups and proxies, and prior United States government unclassified assessments indicated that, quote, Iran has historically provided up to $100 million annually in combined support to Palestinian terrorist groups, including Hamas, Palestinian Islamic Jihad, otherwise known as the PIJ, and the Popular Front for Liberation of Palestinians General Command. This is all accurate and supported by international intelligence agencies from around the world. This is all 100% verified and correct. Whereas Hamas used rudimentary civilian equipment such as bulldozers, paragliders, and rubber boats in assault on Israel, demonstrating the importance of fully enforcing tight controls on what materials go into the Gaza Strip, including through vetting of assistance. This is logical and this is accurate. Going on. Whereas under the 2016 U.S.-Israel Memorandum of Understanding, otherwise known as an MOU, you may hear that from time to time in news media. That's what an MOU is, a Memorandum of Understanding. The United States pledged to provide Israel $3.3 billion per year in foreign military financing programs assistance and $500 million per year in missile defense for 10 years, which Congress has appropriated annually. This is part of the United States international foreign aid. We give foreign aid to many nations. We give about $1 billion a year just to Egypt alone. So this is not unusual. It is larger than most nations, but it is not unusual or something that is unique to Israel itself. Whereas Section 1273 of the William M. Thornberry National Defense Authorization Act for fiscal year 2021 authorized not less than $3.3 billion in foreign military financing program assistance for Israel for each of the fiscal years 2021 through 2028 in accordance with the 2016 U.S.-Israel Memorandum of Understanding. Basically, they're continuing to do what they said in 2016 and extended it to 2028. Essentially, they're extending the continued same amount of funding for 2 additional years. Whereas Congress has responded with additional appropriations beyond the terms of the 2016 U.S.-Israeli Memorandum of Understanding as needed, including in March 2022 when Congress appropriated an additional $1 billion for Iron Dome defense system after the May 2021 conflict in which Hamas launched more than 4,400 rockets at Israel. Again, this is factually correct, and those missiles were bought from Iran. These were Iran rockets that were used predominantly to attack civilians. So again, this is an ongoing, consistent threat to Israel. The United States helped them above and beyond the aid we were already giving to help them with an Iron Dome, which has effectively nullified some 90% of the rockets that are fired into Israel, preventing the widespread death of innocent civilians that Hamas seeks to kill. Whereas Israel is a major non-NATO ally and major strategic partner of the United States. Now, therefore, be it. So, as summarized by this bill, HR771, everything stated is true. Everything is substantiated both internationally and within the United States from every media source. Nothing that has been stated is incorrect. And while some would say, well, maybe we shouldn't be spending this money overseas, that's a different question. We are supporting our ally, our only ally in the Middle East. They are being persecuted. Their civilians are being targeted and attacked for many years consistently. This is something that we often hear. Well, we have to help and humanitarian. What's more humanitarian than preventing civilian deaths that are unnecessary? In providing military aid, and in particular, missile defenses that allow civilians to be protected from a terrorist organization that's seeking to genocide individuals based on their religion. There is an argument that can be made that the United States doesn't need to spend on every foreign event around the world. I agree with that. There is also something to be said for defending our allies, as we have been doing, without direct intervention. Providing them missile defense is not direct intervention, and it helps to save lives. I don't see that as being a bad thing to do. So let me pause here for a moment. So far, in this resolution, HR 771, which the news media didn't bother to go over with you, what we can establish and understand clearly is it is making a very clear statement of facts that happened and have been confirmed. We have identified the threats, which would be Hezbollah, the Houthis out of Yemen, Hamas, and Iran. So we have identified that ongoing threat. We have identified the facts as they exist. Some may not like the funding that is going to Israel. It is not unusual or out of the norm for us to support our allies in this manner. I don't think Rich or anyone has any argument with this so far. I think their argument comes from what is next. So let's actually pay attention to this in a way, and again, to a degree that the mainstream media will never take time to tell you about. The House of Representatives, 1, stands with Israel as it defends itself against the barbaric war launched by Hamas and other terrorists. That's a good thing. I don't think anyone has a dispute against that, except maybe the Democratic Socialists of America, Harvard, Cornell University, and some other far-left extremists that somehow decide they want to support genocide. Separate of that very small minority of people around the world, the rest of us say this is a good thing. 2. Reaffirm Israel's right to self-defense, which is something that is agreed upon across the world. 3. Condemn Hamas' brutal war against Israel. Anyone who is not anti-Semitic would agree with this. The only people who seem to agree with this are those predominantly in the Middle East, like Iran, that wish to commit genocide, and some far-left factions of the United States. 4. Calls out on all countries to unequivocally condemn Hamas's brutal war against Israel. There's nothing wrong with that. Again, this is a war created by terrorists against civilians. Of course, we would denounce it and would ask everyone, especially our allies, to support us in denouncing terrorism. Calls on Hamas to immediately cease their violent attacks and safely release all living hostages and return the bodies of the deceased hostages. This is not a horrible thing to ask for. This isn't saber rattling. This isn't an overreach. This is what should happen. These individuals who are more than just Israelis, again, they are from nations across the world, should never have been taken hostage. They should never have been targeted in the first place. It is only right to say, return these individuals. And it's a violation of UN human rights to have taken them in the first place. Number 6, the United States House of Representatives mourns the over 900 Israelis and 11 Americans killed and over 2,600 others wounded in Hamas's unprovoked attack on Israel. Again, the numbers are significantly higher than this. We know that there are at least 1,600 Israelis that died. We know that there are at least 33 Americans that have died. We know that there are at least 15 Americans that were taken hostage, as well as individuals from around the rest of the world. These numbers are accurate. Number 7, reaffirms the United States' commitment to Israel's security, including through security assistance in accordance with the 2016 U.S. Memorandum of Understanding. What's wrong with saying we continue to support our ally? Number 8, urges full enforcement of the Taylor Force Act, Title 10 of Division S of Public Law 115-141, 132 Statute 1143, and other restrictions in United States law to prevent the United States foreign assistance from benefiting terrorists directly or indirectly. This is important. Essentially, what they have identified and Democrats agreed with is that humanitarian aid, which indirectly benefits Hamas, a terrorist organization, in their act of attempted genocide, cannot be allowed. So when Joe Biden says he wants to give $105 million to Hamas for humanitarian aid, that is directly and indirectly aiding and abetting terrorism. That is not a law allowed by United States law. Congress is only reaffirming law that already exists. They are just reconfirming that the United States position on terrorism has not changed, that the United States will not directly or indirectly support terrorism, although we have in the past done so, as we saw in 2016 with the Iran nuclear deal, when then Secretary of State John Kerry admitted on CNBC January of 2016 and stated that the United States was indirectly, through the Iran nuclear deal, supporting terrorism, that the funds that we were providing to Iran because of that deal would be used by the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps to promote terrorism around the world, and it did. The net increase of terrorism happened in conjunction with the monies and sanctions that were lifted and monies that were given to Iran. So, while we have seen in the past that the United States government has violated this statute, we would hope that going forward that our government would realize this is a crime, this is criminal, this is illegal, it is unacceptable, and its consequences do not benefit peace in the world. It does not promote stability in the world. And Congress, 222 Republicans and 209 Democrats all agree on that. Number 9, condemns Iran's support for terrorist groups and proxies, including Hamas and Palestinian Islamic Jihad. We do not support terrorist organizations. That would be Hezbollah. That would be the Houthis in Yemen. That would be the Iran-backed rebels and terrorists in Syria, in Iraq, in Afghanistan. We don't support terrorism. And it doesn't matter if its name is Hamas or anything else. We don't support it. This should be pretty straightforward. It apparently isn't at Harvard. It isn't at Cooper Union. It isn't at Cornell University, where they support terrorism indirectly. I would like to say indirectly, but as we see in Cornell University, the teachers there have somehow promoted Hamas to the point that students at Cornell are voluntarily stating they are members of a terrorist organization. We have a student who has been arrested because they identify as a member of Hamas. That should be troubling to everyone in America. Number 10, the House of Representatives urges full enforcement of the United States sanctions against Iran to prevent Iran's funding of terrorist groups, including Hamas and the Palestinian Islamic Jihad. This is perhaps where I think some libertarians, some individuals like RFK Jr., isolationists who want to detach the United States from other events around the world, this is probably where they think it's saber rattling, where this is provoking Iran. Except Iran is the one that is doing the provocation. Again, Hamas, Hezbollah, the Houthis in Yemen, the various rebel factions in Syria, in Iraq, in Afghanistan, they are all backed by Iran. Iran is and is known across the world in every agency. They are the number one supporter of global terror in the world. So, yes, it would go and make sense that to stop Hamas from continuing to be able to attempt genocide, we want to go to the source of their funding, the source of their support, which is Iran, and try to stop that. We stop the root of the problem, we stop the problem. And if the root of the problem is Iran providing funding and weapons to commit war, well, then we stop war and genocide and terrorism. This makes sense to me. And this isn't something that we have never said before. This isn't a new policy of the United States. It is a reiteration of the policy that already exists. It's just saying that we haven't forgotten. Number 11, the House of Representatives, Democrats and Republicans overwhelmingly, stands ready to assist Israel with emergency resupply and other security, diplomatic, and intelligence support. We are standing behind our allies. We are living up to our words and our policies, our agreements. We are doing what an ally would do, in addition to the fact that this is also in our national interest. All right, so I've gone through in detail HR771 that our Congress, the United States Congress, voted on, that my friend Rich Pertel has an issue with, that many people seem to, well, not many, that some people have an issue with. And I'm not saying that everyone who has an issue with it supports Hamas or supports global terror or genocide. That's not the same thing. There's a big difference, and I want to make sure it's clear. There's a big difference between supporting Hamas, like we see at Harvard University, at Cornell University, like we see at Cooper Union and many colleges across America. There's a big difference between what the Democratic Socialists of America support and saying that the United States shouldn't be getting involved in more and more events around the world. There's a big difference. They're two different things. I believe my friend Rich has a valid concern that Iran is saber rattling, that Iran is trying to use the reluctance of many Americans to want to conduct war, which is a fair and valid thing, to try and cause the United States to not support our ally. Now, Rich says it's Republicans that are saber rattling. We have debunked that. It is Republicans and Democrats that stand united overwhelmingly in their support of our only ally, Israel. So to say it's saber rattling, to say that it's Republicans is unfair and inaccurate. Is it saber rattling? Now, we've gone through every single word of this resolution. I don't believe it's saber rattling. It is a statement of support. It is an acknowledgement that there is a U.S. interest in this. American citizens have been killed. American citizens have been taken hostage. This is an American national security issue. America, the government, only exists to protect American citizens. That is its number one absolute purpose, to protect Americans at home and abroad. That is a fact. That is what every government is in existence for. That is their purpose, to protect its citizens at home and abroad. So this isn't merely in defense of Israel. This is in defense of the United States. I think that's an important distinction and an important factor that must be looked at. We have to protect our people. We have to take a stand in this, not just because it's our ally, but it's because it's our own people targeted too. We cannot forget that. And we see that the mainstream news media is trying to forget that we are seeing in our colleges, that they are actively eliminating that aspect of this. And I think it's essential because our allies and the rest of the world are looking at this. And if we are hesitant, if we once again, as we did in Afghanistan, as we did in Ukraine, as we did this year in the Sudan, if we again abandon American citizens and forget that our citizens have come under attack, then what does it matter? We have no agreements at that point. It's a free-for-all around the world. We have no allies. We have nothing to stand on. Even our own principles are subject to corruption if we aren't willing to defend our people. We are weak. And that's one of the reasons why we have seen groups like Hamas, Hezbollah, ISIS, Al-Qaeda, the Taliban, and nations like Iran take this opportunity to assault the United States, our allies, and our principles around the world. I don't believe that's saber rattling. I think this is a recommitment to our fundamental values as Americans, both in terms of how we support our allies and also how we represent our own nation, how we defend our own people. I respect Rich Patel. I respect and understand his concern. He doesn't want to see America in another multi-decades-long war, like we have seen in Iraq, like we have seen in Afghanistan. I understand that. And I understand that concern. I don't want to see us to go into a war without the intent of winning that war, to just fight another battle, a police action. That has never been in our best interest. Look at Korea, look at Vietnam. It's not a good thing for the world or for the United States. But I do believe that we need to forcefully stand up for our allies and, more importantly, for our own people. And when the main threat, the root of the threat, isn't Hamas, it isn't Hezbollah or ISIS or Al-Qaeda, but in fact is Iran, then we need to make the message clear to Iran, especially when Iran is directly threatening the United States. They have made the statement several times that if Israel is defending itself, Iran will attack America and Americans, both internationally and at home. That's what they said. That is what they believe. This is what the threats that have been made approximately October 25th against the United States. That's not saber rattling. That's standing up for yourself. And when we misunderstand that and we look at this and say, well, this is us trying to be oppressive. No, we are reactionary. We are reacting to the threats that are coming against us. Iran didn't just say, oh, America, if you get involved. They said, if Israel defends itself, that Iran and its assets, its allies, its puppets would attack America. That has nothing to do with the United States. The United States, they didn't say if the United States went into Gaza. They said if Israel goes into Gaza, if Israel defends itself, Iran would attack America. That's a threat against us. To say that we will stand up against that isn't saber rattling. That's an appropriate and proper response. That is a defense of our people and our nation and our core values. Perhaps I think the biggest problem that many people have, like RFK, many who support isolationism, whether that be in the Libertarian Party or within Democrats or within Republicans, people who say, well, the United States needs to be more isolationist. I understand that viewpoint because it's safer, or at least it feels safer to say that we're not involved, except that's really not a reality. The United States is the superpower of the world. That is a fact. The United States is the beacon of freedom in the world, and we are under attack consistently because we exist, because we have the highest quality of life and the highest amount of freedom in the world. We are a target. We are a target by those who are autocratic and theocratic and disagree with us. Should we spend $3.3 billion or more on Israel? That's an argument. That's a debate. Maybe it's too much money, maybe it's not enough money. Considering that the United States government is spending well over $2 trillion a year, that we have 33, soon to be $35 trillion in debt, $3 billion isn't really a whole lot of money. It's actually insignificant in the long run. And that part of our spending is really meaningless. But it is not inconsequential. I mean, it is billions of dollars. Would it make a difference if the United States didn't spend, let's call it $5 billion on Israel next year? No. It wouldn't change anything about the United States debt. It doesn't change the amount of inflation in America. It doesn't change the amount of interest we're paying on the national debt. It wouldn't change the amount of the deficit for 2023 or 2024. It changes nothing. It is literally, virtually, statistically insignificant in the amount of spending that the United States does. So stopping funding to Israel because we're trying to save money is, sadly, it's laughable. It makes no difference. We spend far too much already on too many other things. We're talking about spending $12 billion just on illegal aliens in New York City alone. That's more than what we're talking about to defend our ally and our own citizens in a foreign nation that are under attack, that have been threatened with genocide for merely existing. I think if we're going to spend money, we can make the argument that we shouldn't be spending the money on illegal aliens who have broken United States law, that are continuing to evade prosecution of the law. And why should we be giving them 4-star hotels and $60,000 per person to live on in the United States? If we want to cut our spending, let's start there. But why would we stop spending money to defend our people? Let me go back to the core. The argument is it saber rattling against Iran? I don't think it is. Is it provocative to Iran? I don't think it is. It's reactionary. It is a reaction to what has been said and done against the United States and our ally Israel. Do I support HR771? Absolutely. That's why the majority, overwhelming majority of Democrats and Republicans have supported this, because it is a good resolution and it is a good position for the United States and our allies. We need more bills, and we need to actually stand by this, especially item 8, that we do not directly or indirectly give aid to terrorist organizations like Hamas or Hezbollah or the Houthis, and therefore also support and give aid and comfort to Iran, especially as all of these groups want to destroy America, American citizens at home and abroad. I wanted to take the time to look at this in detail, to go over every single word so that you know what's going on in our government. The mainstream news media wants to give it to you in a minute and a half. And maybe on this issue, I'm sure I could have summed it up much faster and much more easily. But when you do that, when you just summarize, when you gloss over the details, things are missed. Like the fact that America is directly involved because Americans have been killed and taken hostage, because threats have been made by Iran against America. And through the agents of Iran, we are seeing those threats executed. That this is not excessive by any understanding of the numbers and is necessary, both for the protection of our ally, but also for the protection of America itself. Is there any specific point in this that anyone disagrees with? I don't think there should be. And looking at it in total, I don't see anything that is objectionable. Thomas Massey is upset because we are spending money overseas on a conflict overseas. But that's a conflict that involves Americans. Actively involves Americans. There are American hostages right now. They are being tortured right now. We have abandoned Americans who are being tortured in Afghanistan. Let's not repeat that process. Let's end that. Let's get them home in Afghanistan, in the Ukraine, in the Sudan, and yes, in Israel. Let's get our American citizens back home. And let's make sure they are safe. And let's make sure that rogue nations and terrorist organizations do not ever want to take American citizens hostage again. I don't think that's too much to ask for. I don't think that's incorrect. And if it costs us $3 billion on a budget, on an annual budget, we spend $2 trillion, I don't think it's worth arguing about. It's not enough money to make a difference. But this is the way I feel about it. This is what I see in this bill. Tell me, now that you know exactly what it says, in complete context, what do you think? Should we be supporting HR771, and why? We look forward to hearing what you have to say about this.
Obey and believe.
Hell no! I'm happy to be here with you today. Understand the logic, and we see this in social media on a regular basis, and it's something that Newsweek decided not to tell you about. Representative Sheila Jackson-Lee has no idea what she's talking about.
You can meet a very, very stringent accuracy rate when it's important, when it matters, like in federal elections.